there is no doubt that the tradition of the Agamas, the tradition of the Nikayas, is the closest, even though it was compiled, as we know, in Sri Lanka, in Mahavihara, 500 years after the demise of Buddha. It was an oral tradition, but it is no doubt the closest tradition, so it is impossible to believe that it was the only tradition. It was the closest tradition in Pali to what was the early teachings of the Buddha. And when you study, when you take the pain, and it is really worthwhile, especially for students of Theravada, it is really worthwhile to study Sanskrit tradition. You will see that actually the early Sanskrit tradition is based, when I speak Sanskrit tradition, I especially refer to the most important part of Sanskrit tradition, which is the Bodhisattva practice. In order to understand Buddhism, we need to understand the practice of the disciples, but we also need to understand the practice of the Buddha. It is same in all traditions. The practice of the Buddha were the paramitas, and Nagarjuna, the founders of the two philosophical traditions in Sanskrit Buddhism, which has spread all over Asia, the Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Asanga, Vasubandhu, they all based their teachings on investigation of the Agamas. They are actually quoting Agamas to define their understanding of Buddhism as Madhyamika or as Chitramatrata. So this is very important. So today I am going to speak on a very wide topic, so I have to make it very brief. Now, on the development of the practice of the Brahmaviharas, we see how wonderfully the Buddhism developed from the basic concept to more wider concepts based on the understanding or investigation of the meaning of the Agamas. So let me say first few words about the understanding of the Brahmaviharas and scope of Brahmaviharas in the Pali tradition, which I was privileged to learn in Myanmar and in Sri Lanka, especially in Myanmar, where this tradition has been best preserved. I had the privilege of learning with some great teacher and practicing under him. So in the Pali tradition, the object of the Brahmaviharas, the object of Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha, are the beings. This is a basic object, and without understanding this basic object, we will not understand how the understanding of this basic object has eventually further developed, especially in the Pragya Paramita tradition of the transcendental wisdom, which is a base for both Chinese and Tibetan Buddhism, through which Buddhism has spread to the practically whole of Asia. So the first motherland of Buddhism is India, second is China, and the third is Tibet. From these areas, Buddhism has spread to all Asia, and it has spread also especially due to the practice of the superior dwellings due to the practice of love, compassion, joy and equanimity, not due to force. This is the greatness of the Buddhist tradition. It used the positive attitude, it used non-fundamentalism to spread their teachings. Now, the Nalanda, as mentioned, according to the what I have heard from a lecture of His Holiness Dalai Lama, according to Venerable Dalai Lama, the actually Tibetan Buddhism is Nalanda Buddhism. And Nalanda Buddhism is the Buddhism which emphasized the development of the Buddhist doctrines in all different areas of learning. So learning Buddhism means not only adhyatmika vidya, not only the inner science, how to become enlightened, but it was also connected with the study of logic, study of etymology, study of medicine, and even study of Shilpa, of arts, in order to make the teaching about the mind accessible to all stratas of the society, to all people without exception. And this is indeed the greatness of Buddhism. Anyone can use the Buddhist teachings to become a Satpurusha, to become better in what one is doing. And for that, indeed, we need to practice the understanding of our sensation, how to understand our sensation better, how to make our sensation, how to make our sensitivity to ourselves, to others, and to the world more subtle in the understanding of Buddhism, as the Agamas also explain, like Bahuvedaniya Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. The progress in meditation is a progress in the subtlety of the sensations, until we come to the most subtle of all sensations, which goes beyond sensation, which goes beyond the dwelling of the mind, and that is a sensation of liberation. This is also teaching of the Agamas. So, according to the Theravada tradition, the practice of the Brahmaviharas is a practice of special sila, special samadhi, and special panya. So, when you study, for example, the Agamas, the Nikayas, you will find the Atha Nagaraka Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, where after the parinirvana of the Buddha, Ananda is being asked about the Amata Dwara, about the elixir of immortality that the Buddha has taught during his life. What are the methods? What is the Dwara for the elixir of immortality that the Buddha has taught during his life? And the Ananda replies that Buddha has taught 11 Amatadvara, 11 methods for immortality during his life, as far as I understand. Which are the 11? So he explains the first 7, they are the practice of vipassana in the dhyanas. The practice of vipassana nowadays, it is very spread, only the sukha vipassana, especially in India. Most of the people come into touch with Buddhism through this sukha vipassana methods, which is very wonderful. But actually, when you study the agamas, when you study the nikayas, it is especially emphasized the deep panya is based on the deep practice of the samadhi, the deep practice of the dhyanas. So 11, why not 12? Because we have the 4 rupa dhyanas and 4 arupa dhyanas. Why not 12? Because the commentary explains, among others, this the 8th dhyana, nasanya na eva asanya, is beyond the scope of even the arahats. It is only the scope of sensitivity of the Buddha, who can still, in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, clearly differentiate the 5 aggregates and understand them as being not base for the released mind. The 5 aggregates are not the base for a released mind. So what is the peculiarity of the Buddha? How is explained the Buddha? The Buddha is explained as one who has gone beyond sensations. This is also teaching of the Dhammapada. This is also teaching of the Sanskrit sutras, especially the Mahayana sutras. The Buddha is one who dwells in the world but has no dwelling in the world. As Dhammapada says, he is anoka. So he is free. He is free because he does not hold to his sensation. He is a freedom in regard to sensations. This is also explained in the Atthakathas. And this is our base for understanding also the Sanskrit tradition, based on the transcendental wisdom. The Bodhisattva dwells in the world in the sense that he is learning non-dwelling. And non-dwelling means not holding to the nimitta, to the sign of objects. When you don't hold to perception, you don't hold to sensation. And when you don't hold to sensation, you don't hold to the mind. When you don't hold to perceptions, don't hold to sensations, which are the chitta samskaras, which are the formations of the mind, then you live in the world being free. And this is the idea of Buddhism. Live in the world being free. Now, in order to do that, you have to practice vipassana in samadhi. There is no other way. Now we have mentioned 7 samadhis in which you can practice vipassana. Now comes another 4. These other 4, they are the samadhi of Brahmaviharas. Why are they? You will find same in Abhidharma Kosha. You will find same in the Pali Abhidhamma. The Brahmaviharas, they are special states of samadhi. That's why they are enumerated extra. Even so, you can practice them in the world with ordinary mind. You can practice them in dhyana with a mind. In dhyana, what is the difference between a normal mind and the dhyana mind? In dhyana mind, you have no akusala chitta. Impossibility. Akusala chitta cannot arise in the dhyana. That is common. That is common to all dhyanas. We need to practice dhyanas in order to remain in the presence of the kusala chitta for a long, long time. When you are master of the dhyana, you can remain in the kusala chitta for hours. Because the sensation in dhyana does not change, the chitta also does not change. The chitta changes when the Vedana changes. The chitta does not change if the Vedana does not change. Now, in the practice of the Brahmaviharas, the object of the Vedana, the object of Vedana is based on touch. There is no touch, there is no Vedana without the touch. Faso Pachaya Vedana. And through this Faso Pachaya Vedana, we distinguish between Kusala Chitta and Akusala Chitta. When we hold to the Vedana, even if we practice the Kusala Chitta, it will not have power. If the Kusala Chitta will have power only when we practice Kusala and do not hold to Kusala. If we practice Kusala, even that is specially emphasized in the Pragya Paramita literature, especially Daimon Sutra, which is so popular, especially in Chinese tradition. As soon as you hold to Vedana, you hold to beings. Because the most important object of Vedana are the beings indeed. The beings are the main object of our defilements. When we hold to the beings, we hold to the Vedana. And when we hold to the Vedana becomes a contradictory Vedana, not a pure Vedana. And the contradictory Vedana is a source of klesha. We are subjected to kleshas because we have contradictory Vedanas. So, in order to avoid contradictory Vedana, precisely we practice the four supreme dwellings of the mind. The love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And when you stay in the samadhi of these supreme dwellings, so this is the best way to purify the mind. The best way to purify the mind is to stay in love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. According to the Chinese tradition, actually this staying in the pure Vedana is also the base for staying in the pure land. The practice of the Bodhisattva path is a practice of the pure land. Staying in the pure land means staying in the pure sensations. So this is emphasized, especially in Chinese Buddhism. Like Huiyuan, who is one of the founders of the Pure Land tradition, he says that we practice love and compassion in order to get rid of the wrong view. The same idea you will find in Nagarjuna also. We are subjected to the wrong view because we don't have sufficient love and compassion.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I see if I can fix the microphone? Otherwise, maybe we continue without it.
Yeah, it does not work. Now, let us come back to the Pali tradition. In the Halidavasa Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha says that since the object of the Brahmaviharas are the beings, the satta Visuddhimagga fancifully interpret as sajjati iti satta. The one who is attached is the being. We are beings, not Buddhas, because we are attached. Of course, for a Sanskrit student, this is a very fanciful etymology, but anyway, etymology is to make the point, and the point is very good. So, because the beings are the object of the Brahmavihara, so at least in the Agamas, or especially in the Nikayas, in Pali. So, in order to get liberation, says the Halidavasa Sutta, we have to combine the practice of the 4 Brahmaviharas with the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, with the Satipatthana. Unless we combine the practice of the 4 Brahmaviharas with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we cannot get liberation. So says the Nikaya. Now we come to the Sanskrit tradition, and you will find a different picture. The Sanskrit tradition extends, there is a tendency to that, even when you read the commentary of Abhidharma Kosha. The Sanskrit tradition extends the area of the object, of the alambana, of the 4 Brahmaviharas, not only to the beings, but also to Dharma, and also to Paramartha, to the highest reality. So this is the very important development in the Sanskrit tradition. The scale of Brahmaviharas includes everything. Not only the beings, but only the Dharma, also the Dharma. Dharma in 2 senses. The Arahat, or the Buddha, he is a Buddha because he does not see any beings. This is clearly explained in the Sanskrit tradition, like Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra also says that you become the Bodhisattva when you don't practice shamatha and vipassana, not seeing any beings, and giving rise to determination for the highest realization, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. If you do like that, you are a Bodhisattva. The same in Diamond Sutra and in many other scriptures. So, we see beings. It does not mean we do not see beings if we practice the Bodhisattva path, but we see beings as the Pragya Paramita Sutras explain in many, many places, like illusion created by magic. A magic man, which is a mind, in Asanga tradition, the Alaya Vijnana, which is the root of duality, creates another another man created by magic, and this is us, the beings. And in the Sanskrit tradition, so the Nagarjuna explains in his commentary to the Pragya Paramita Sutra in 20,000 verses, which is available in Chinese, Taje Tulun. He explains actually that the practice of the Brahmaviharas is a base for the practice of the paramis, for the practice of the 6 or 10 paramis, which we have to master in order to become the Supreme Buddha. Not just the disciple Buddha, but the Supreme Buddha. So without this base, without this ashraya, the paramis cannot be completed. in the Theravada tradition, among others, the metta, there is a metta parami among the 10 paramis, and there is a upekha paramis, and they are enumerated in the end, after all the other paramis. So in order to become a Buddha, you have to become perfect in metta and in upekha. And you cannot become perfect in upekha until you have become perfect in metta. This is very interesting. In the Sanskrit and Pali tradition, metta is a base for the other 3 supreme dwellings. If we don't have metta, if we don't have maitri, we cannot practice karuna. Nagarjuna explains, due to metta, the bodhisattva can realize the anuttara samyak sambodhi, and due to karuna, he can make the great karma. Without doing the great karma, we cannot become the supreme arahats. This is even explained in the Pali commentaries to Brahmajala Sutta. Tika explains precisely that. There are small arahats and there are great arahats, and there is a supreme arahat who is a Buddha. When we want to become a Buddha, we have to practice upekha. No way of becoming a Buddha, small Buddha, great Buddha, without mastering upekha. All Buddhas, they have a Shat Anga Upekha, explains the Visuddhimagga, which means upekha against the 6 doors of the mind. Without these 6 doors, the mind cannot work. And this arahat is one who has upekha, who has detachment, equanimity to these 6 doors of the mind. But from the perspective of the parami practice, you cannot have, if you want to become a great arahat, you cannot become a great arahat until you have practiced upekha together with metta, karuna and mudita. Then you become the great arahat. And if you have practiced them to the utmost, you become you attain, if we can speak of attainment, anuttara samyak sambuddha. So, the Sanskrit scriptures explain actually the Buddha. What is it? Buddha is anoka, without a dwelling. Where does he dwell? Answer is, he dwells in metta, karuna, mudita, upeksha, without an object. And this dwelling in these 4 supreme dwellings without an object, that is actually the some sutras explain, that is the supreme dwelling, that is the dwelling in the paramartha of the anuttara samyak sambodhi. So this is how the concept of the 4 supreme dwellings develop eventually in the Buddhist tradition into all-inclusive practice. So because we have the time restriction, it is a very great topic. You can, I encourage others to work on that. That is a very wonderful topic. You can find in all kinds of scriptures, you can find references like Sutra Alankara, like the commentaries of the Nagarjuna, in many places, like the Yogachara Bhumi Shastra. Many places you will find some wonderful explanations of this practice of the 4 Brahmaviharas and how to extend and sublimate our sensations and due to sensations the mind on this practice of the supreme dwellings. So now just a few informations. So this practice, this basic practice remains in all Buddhist scriptures, the beings. We cannot understand the 4 Brahmaviharas without practicing love, compassion, joy and equanimity in regard to the beings. So this practice to the beings is a base. However we develop this base, it is based on this basic concept. Then the Arahat, he is Arahat because he does not hold to the beings. He has no soka, no bhaya, because he has equanimity. Piyato jayate soko, piyato jayate bhaya, piyato vipamutasa, nati soko, nati bhaya, says the Dhammapada. And this is very difficult to understand. But this is a basic concept of the Brahmaviharas. To practice the Brahmaviharas, we have to practice love without attachment. Love is the most liberating force in our mind, but it is also the most binding force of our mind. So, as even the Greek philosopher Socrates, you will find in Plato the Symposium on Love. So he says that love, the father of love, is wisdom, Sophia, and the mother of love is dukkha. So we are, so to say, born from this contradiction of sukha dukkha. As this contradiction of sukha dukkha is the contradiction of all beings. And this contradiction of sukha dukkha we solve by deep practice of the Brahmaviharas. So, being subjected to the contradiction of sukha dukkha, we have the challenge of practicing the Brahmaviharas in depth. Why? Because the deeper this contradiction, the deeper are the conflicts in our mind. And these conflicts can be only solved when we learn the wisdom of depriving our love from grasping. This is precisely what the Pali tradition says, what the Sanskrit tradition says. The true practice of wisdom is depriving love from grasping, from graha. Due to that practice, we, as Nagarjuna explains, we can then do the great deeds. If we don't engage in this practice, we are unable to do great deeds. We want to do the great deeds, but we will never be able because we have not the base. The Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra precisely explained that. If we don't have the solid base in Maitri, we will never succeed in the paramis, we will never succeed in the process of becoming a true bodhisattva. So, according to Nagarjuna, the practice of karuna is a practice of anatta, is a practice of non-self. And the practice of non-self is precisely seeing the ultimate reality in the five aggregates, not to cling to the five aggregates, means to find joy in the highest reality. To find sukha in the highest reality. Vasubandhu in the Abhidharma Kosha explains Maitri or explains Shraddha, faith, as prema. What other is Maitri is and love, non-defiled love. So the non-defiled love is the source of immeasurable joy. It is very important to understand that the Bodhisattva tradition cannot be separated from the Bhakti movement, which has, so to say, completely changed India. From the emphasis to analytical mind, the Bodhisattva path is based on Shraddha, based on the deepening of Shraddha. This is the spirit of the time when the acharyas of the Mahayana have formulated their thesis, and on their thesis the whole of the deeper understanding of the Buddhist practice was based. So you will find as early as Kumarajiva, you will find this emphasis that the true love, the true understanding of compassion should be based on the joy in the ultimate reality. This joy in the ultimate reality is the light of the mind. Without this light of the mind, so to say, we are lost in our vikalpas, in our differentiations. So, according to Chinese tradition, which according to the Nagarjuna's commentary of the Pragya Paramita Sutras, the practice of mudita, the practice of upeksha, leads to the getting rid of trishna, of tanha. First, we have to practice love and compassion to get rid of wrong view. Then we understand the mudita, the joy, and here the joy has been transform into the joy from for the highest reality. And then, of course, that is a basic concept of Buddhism. You cannot become a Buddha without practicing upeksha. And upeksha purifies the previous three Brahmaviharas, purifies love, compassion and joy, and purifies the sukha and dukkha. Gets us rid of the contradiction between the sukha and dukkha, and such gets us rid of all worries, all depressions, all fears, because all this is based on the clinging to the sukha and dukkha. So, like Bodhicharya Avatara, the Shantideva says, if you have dukkha and worry, then how will you by worries improve your situation? If you cannot improve your situation, why do you worry? So, being subjected to clinging to sukha, dukkha, we are subjected to what yoga calls the chitta vrittis. There is a great similarity between the Buddhist tradition, especially the Yogacara, and the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Our experience in the world is based on the gunas. Gunas means the sensations. And through these sensations, our mind is controlled. So it becomes a vritti. When we have stabilized the mind, we have stabilized the world. So now it is almost 1 o'clock. There is much more I would like to say, but for today maybe enough. Some of you may be hungry already, waiting impatiently for lunch. Some of you already left. Hunger is the master of the world. And being compassionate, we should try our best to alleviate this problem. This is the most burning problem of our times. The hunger on one side and the luxury on the other side. This inequality is the base for the most of the chitta vrittis, unfortunately.
Sir, can you explain 5 minutes in Hindi, whatever you have said? 5 minutes in Hindi.
Speak Hindi also. Oh, good.
यहाँ तो मगे बोलते थे.
What is the question? You requested, can you explain in 5 minutes in Hindi?
हाँ.
तो योगा अनुसार और बुद्ध धर्म और जैन धर्म के अनुसार हमारा चंचल चित्त, हमारा अस्थिर चित्त के कारण ये वेदना है. हमारा जो दिल में जो भय है, जो शोक है, जो दुख है, कारण ये सब वेदना के वगैरह हमारे पास प्रज्ञा नहीं है. हमारे पास ठीक विश्लेषण हम असंभव हैं ठीक से वेदना समझना. ये हमारा अपराध है. हमारा अपराध इस दुनिया में ये है कि हम ठीक से वेदना को नहीं समझते हैं। वेदना ठीक समझने के लिए हमको प्रेम, करुणा, मुदिता, उपेक्षा विकसित करना चाहिए। ये ही उत्तम उपाय है। इस उपाय अलावा हम कभी भी सफल नहीं होंगे स्थिर चित्त बनाने के लिए। स्थिर चित्त का उद्देश्य प्राप्त करने के लिए योग अभ्यास, योग है। योग अभ्यास के उद्देश्य यही है। यह सब भारतीय परंपरा में यही एक ही है। यद्यपि चार्वाका योग अंतर नहीं है, तो चार्वाका के लिए यही उद्देश्य है, दूसरा उद्देश्य नहीं है। सब भारतीय दर्शन में ये उद्देश्य है, भावना के उद्देश्य है चित्त स्थिर बनाने का। ये हम कर सकते हैं क्योंकि हमारे पास ये दुख नहीं है, हम भूखी नहीं हैं, ये आरोग्य है हमारे पास, हमारे पास आश्रय योगा करने के लिए। यदि योगा करने के लिए आश्रय नहीं है, हम कैसे योग करेंगे? ये असंभव है। यदि आश्रय है तो हम भावना के द्वारा हम चित्त स्थिर बना सकते हैं। यदि आश्रय नहीं है तो हम कभी भी सफल नहीं होंगे। इसलिए गरीब लोग को ज़्यादा योग के लिए दिलचस्पी नहीं है क्योंकि आश्रय तो नहीं है। तो महायान और बोधिसत्व मार्ग में मैं ये शब्द महायान मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगा क्योंकि बुद्धा कोई महायान हीनयान नहीं सिखाया। ये शब्द हीनयान सिर्फ सधर्म पुंडरीक में निकला। ये बहुत ये हो सकता है गुप्तता में, इससे पहले नहीं। सो बुद्ध धर्म के उद्देश्य, योग के उद्देश्य, धर्म के उद्देश्य ये चित्त स्थिर बनाना। चित्त स्थिर बनाने के लिए हमको भी ये नया चाहिए, लॉजिक चाहिए। हमको भी आयुर्वेद चाहिए। आयुर्वेद असंग के अनुसार मतलब जो चीज़ जो धर्म है उसका भी कारण है, जो बीमारी है उसका भी कारण है। यदि हम कारण जानते हैं तो हम चिकित्सा कर सकते हैं। चिकित्सा ये धर्म है। और चिकित्सा के लिए यदि हम खुद और सबसे कोई विशेष कोई फर्क नहीं करते हैं, ये बोधिसत्व मार्ग है। तो ये भी शिल्प है, उपाय। करुणा के लिए हमको उपाय चाहिए, और उपाय और करुणा ये नालंदा परंपरा है। नालंदा परंपरा क्या है? करुणा और उपाय के परंपरा। करुणा उपाय के परंपरा ये गंभीर धर्म है। इससे अलावा धर्म होगा, लेकिन गंभीर धर्म मुश्किल।
Yeah, just now you have got enlightened through the enlightened words, and the whole lecture is based on personality development. How to develop your personality. The one word that was pragya is the key word today, and because of the pragya and we can't say crime of wisdom, we can say misunderstanding of wisdom, and because of that we have completely destroyed our personality. And the Nalanda tradition was to create a perfect citizen, perfect nation and perfect world. In India, we never followed the concept of narrow nationalism. We always talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And this is the practical example. The practical example of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam was served by our ancient Nalanda educational tradition. So, now on behalf of all of you, I will request the two scholars to give us write-ups so that it will be published and it will be available in publication counter. You can be benefited through his write-ups and through his lecture. So most of you can record. Each and every word is precious words for you, because these lectures are not for a particular subject. This is common to all subjects, and this is based on our Nalanda tradition. Now I pray to my Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir Pulpita to conclude the today's lecture.
Sir, यहीं से बैठेंगे।